Welcome to the Holy Land Dispatch podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. Well, folks, I'm taking the risk of sounding over-dramatic, but I do believe we're going through what might prove to be historic times. There have been some tectonic movements in the past couple of years, and as I record this, we're breathlessly awaiting the return of all remaining hostages kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th of 2023. The events are so big that I'm going to have to cover some of them in more depth than the others, and the sequence may not be linear. Everything is related and, well, I guess we should start with something. I see no bigger events in the past 5 years than October 7th, 2023 and the election of President Donald Trump on November of 2024. I'm not even going to touch the war in Ukraine because A, I'm no expert on that at all, and B, well, this is the Holy Land Dispatch Substack, so naturally the main focus is our neighborhood. Although there are thousands of people who need the daily reminder of what transpired on October 7th, I won't repeat the details. Suffice it to say, on October 7th, the very bad status quo in the Middle East was disrupted by an atrocious attack by Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the rest of its poisonous proxies. For close to 20 years, Israel tolerated, for the most part, what no other nation would. A routine of rockets from Hamas controlled and supported Gaza Strip. A ceaseless armament and reinforcement of an inhumane enemy at our very gates in the south as well as in the north. And no less important, a race to nuclear and ballistic arsenal in Iran, such that would put Israel in a mortal danger. That was the routine, mind you, before the October 7th barbaric attack took place and shuffled all the cards in the Middle East deck. On October 8th, Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to the people of Israel. He did not go into depression. He did not look torn and defeated. Despite his personal feelings, which were like any of our own, he stood tall and made a promise. He said, "We are going to change the face of the Middle East." Of course, the cynics will see it as a master plan to colonize and carry out some conspiracy that you can hear all about from the neo-anti-Semitics. What Netanyahu meant was clear. After waking up from false conceptions on October 7th, it was time to change the paradigm. Time to remind the people who mistook Israel's peace-seeking policies as weakness that it exists for a reason. The reason is, first and foremost, and some Jews would do well to remember that, to serve as a home and shelter for the Jewish people. Gone are the days when Jews are abused with impunity by anyone. Netanyahu, with the amazing support of President Trump on his first term, made it clear that the Middle East can be a symbol for collaboration and prosperity. By signing the Abraham Accords, he signaled to anyone willing to see that his idea of a strong Israel involved making the region itself prosper. When Netanyahu promised on October 8, 2023 to reshape the Middle East, you can bet your pension that he meant far more than beating Hamas in a military skirmish. He named 5 goals for the war. 1. The return of all hostages. 2. The disarmament of Hamas. 3. The demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. 4. Security control over the Gaza Strip by Israel, including the perimeter. 5. An alternative regime in Gaza that is not Hamas or its equivalent PA, a regime that doesn't teach, fund, or send terrorists to harm Israelis. Let's leave these 5 principles for the moment in favor of completing the line of thought I started before. These goals are critical, and without them, the rest wouldn't have a chance in hell. But what Netanyahu was envisioning was leveraging these to change the power structure in the region, enhance the Abraham Accords, in order to make the region shift its focus from the destruction of the only Jewish state and onto building something productive and long-lasting. One may say whatever he wants about Bibi, and believe me, I have my criticism. But he was always one to look beyond the tactical and try to inject some meaning to what Israel does. He wanted to push away a reality that relied on false premises, the two-state delusion, peace through territorial concessions, to make way for a more realistic approach, based on combined interests, incentives, and consequences for everyone involved. This is where I'm going to shift the discussion to the 2024 US elections. I cannot even begin to describe the relief we felt here in Israel when President Trump was elected. I thank the Lord, figuratively and literally, for this outcome. There's no overstating the damage a Kamala Harris administration would bring to Israel and indeed to the region. Following likely the weakest administration in US history, where every Tom, Dick and Harry felt brave enough to square up to the US, an allegedly day-drinking, woke, feeble-minded president would have sent the Middle East into a completely darker place. A candidate who, in her prime, was less coherent than Sleepy Joe on sleeping pills, wouldn't have the self-awareness, let alone the backbone, to deal with crafty politicians like the Turkish president, the Qataris, or Iranians. She would have cost us in the blood of our soldiers with Biden's and her quiet embargo. She would have set us back 20 years in our struggle to create some semblance of stability in the region. So thank God for Donald Trump and thank the American people who voted him into the White House. Donald Trump is a developer. He is a creator. He makes things happen. This was not only the right man in the right place at the right time, it was the only man to be in the place and time. And just like Bibi, President Trump knew that geopolitics are not played on feelings. Really, the childish worldview of so many commentators and spokespersons is absolutely shocking at times. This guy likes that guy and therefore this and that, or the other way around. Such bull. Trump knows that just like in trade, you get things done by aligning interests, setting forth incentives and consequences that fit the profiles of the people and nations you deal with. When the two leaders, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, went to work following the blessed exit of the Obama-Biden-Harris administration, it was a thing of beauty. I have criticism to offer to Trump, just like I do for Bibi. But we live in the real world, and one must recognize the moment. It's not one thing. It's not just the unfreezing of the military embargo enforced by Biden. It's not just the B-2 bombers in Iran. It's not just the comprehensive plan we're following unfold now. What these two leaders have done, and are still doing, is nothing short of awesome, as in evoking a feeling of awe. The level of coordination, the deep understanding of details and the interests of all sides, the opportunistic maneuvers around developments on the ground. I dare you to find a better example of two Western leaders working in tandem for the betterment of a whole region like that. The only thing that comes to mind was, of course, the US and Britain during the Second World War, and I'm not sure that even that was quite as it is with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Now, let us review the aforementioned 5 principles that the Israeli government defined as the exit point to the war in Gaza, and see how close we are to achieve them. With Trump's plan in full swing, we can hopefully check off the first one, the return of all hostages. This achievement is not to be underestimated. No one, and I mean no one on the left or the right in Israel, saw that coming. Hamas, a well-known cruel and inhumane terrorist organization, held on to hostages for 2 years, and we did not see a scenario other than our own capitulation in which they give up this ace they were holding. So how did that happen? Trump and Bibi, Bibi and Trump. Netanyahu understood after a few partial hostage deals that Hamas will simply not give up his aces. He also held fast against the constant demand from globalist weaklings such as Starmer and Macron, as well as internal opposition to simply stop the war without achieving any of its main goals in order to appease Hamas and return the hostages. Netanyahu drew a line in the sand and said no more. The table was flipped. It's not Hamas dictating, stop the war and we'll return the hostages. It's Israel dictating, return the hostages and then we'll talk about ending the war. And Bibi remained true to his words, which is the only way to deliver an effective ultimatum. That, and presenting the consequences for refusal, i.e., the operation in Gaza City. Having gained control of roughly 80% of the Gaza Strip, Netanyahu ordered the IDF to start moving into Gaza City with clear intentions to follow that up until the IDF controlled the whole strip. In the plan, he left possible exit points in case Hamas chose to raise the white flag. But wait, how did Israel reach that point where it could make that move at all? Well, let's jump back in time and recap previous episodes. Netanyahu was adamant to start the Israeli response to October 7th in Gaza, and the first military operation focused solely on the Gaza Strip. Against foolish advice to attack in Gaza and Lebanon against Hezbollah in parallel, Netanyahu chose to focus the main effort down south, while the Air Force started preparing the ground up north. When the IDF solidified its positions in the Gaza Strip, the ground attack in Lebanon started. Then we had two major operations that largely crippled Hezbollah, namely the Pager operation and the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah. While the organization itself, Hezbollah, was not annihilated, it was effectively dealt with, which allowed a ceasefire under which Israel still has the right to initiate military action when it identifies attempts on the enemy's side to breach the agreement. Iran then had to respond and fired missiles and drones towards Israel. That operation failed due to a coalition of armies. The effect of these last few operations was that al-Julani saw an opportunity in Syria, and very likely backed and encouraged by Turkey, made his move on Hezbollah-protected Assad regime. Israel responded to Iran's attack with what seemed like a limited attack, but proved to be a preparatory operation for the inevitable clash between the IDF and the IRGC. When all signs pointed to Iran racing to get a nuclear bomb, it was time for Operation Rising Lion in Iran. That ended with an emphatic move courtesy of President Trump and the B-2 bombers. Back to present moment. Having witnessed all of its allies crumble one by one, having watched most of its leadership hunted and killed by the IDF and the intelligence community, having been cornered to a shrinking 20% of the Gaza Strip, Hamas was pinned. But wait. The conditions were not yet ripe. Israel was ready to pounce, yes. Hamas was cornered, yes. But Hamas has sponsors, most prominent of which are Qatar and Turkey, but to an extent also Egypt. And we know that for the past 2 years these sponsors were pushing Hamas to continue and reject every deal. So what is to be done about those? Another case where a dreadful Kamala Harris administration would have crumbled. In comes President Trump with his crew. He lines up all these players and makes them take the position that aligns with his goals. How come Qatar pressures Hamas to accept this deal? How come Erdogan promises to help, even while he talks so horribly about Netanyahu, he still plays ball with President Trump? And so, we find ourselves with a plan that is sponsored by Trump, supported by Israel and other players who are not even its natural allies, and it starts with the release of all hostages. Again, the first step of the plan is the release of all hostages. This is unfathomable, unless you've been listening to Trump and Bibi all along. Had you done that, you might have understood that these two looked at the Middle East with a broad view that so many people are missing. The second principle talks about the disarmament of Hamas. That is in the agreement, and Israel is well within its right to renew the attack on Hamas should they try to evade this. How will it be enforced? None of us know all the details, but there's a clear message here, and I can only hope we will know how to handle that too. Next, the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip. In writing and in the agreement, similar sanctions included. This can be judged over a long period of time. The important thing here, again, is the flipping of the script in Israel. We need to ensure we know what happens in Gaza, unlike before October 7th. Security control over the Gaza Strip by Israel, including the perimeter. This seems like a gray area. I'm not fully aware of the language in the agreement, but one thing is sure. Netanyahu and most of the Israelis understand that Israel's security cannot be contracted anymore to any Palestinian authority or such. Israel must be the one ensuring its security. We will need to wait and see what develops and see if any more insights come from the agreement. An alternative regime in Gaza that is not Hamas or its equivalent PA, a regime that doesn't teach, fund, or send terrorists to harm Israelis. The two words, Palestinian state, are mentioned in this agreement too, and that's very unfortunate. But they are conditioned with full and sweeping reforms in the Palestinian Authority. Such reforms that I don't believe they're willing or indeed capable of performing. If they don't, Israel is not committed to recognize this fantastic state. If they do, well, if such a miracle happens, we already made it abundantly clear that we're happy to extend a hand in peace to anyone who doesn't want to destroy us. While this plan was being formulated, some really embarrassingly weak Western leaders were sounding off their delusional opinions. Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Mark Carney and others thought that the pressure needs to be applied on Israel, rather than on the ones who are holding hostages. You know, the one who committed the October 7th atrocities. These weaklings recognized a fictitious state and rewarded terrorists for their terror, mostly due to their respective bases being made of the very same people who support Hamas. These weaklings now come crawling to congratulate President Trump and try to squeeze in on that Gaza rebuild efforts and whatnot. President Trump is far more gracious than I am on this. I say crawl back to where you came from, weaklings. Shut up. Do not go past go. Do not collect $200. Shame on you. Speaking of shame, I want to spend the second half of this episode showcasing the shameful Israeli media and left, which are one and the same. I'd like to propose an assessment, and once we're done, feel free to let me know if you agree. I claim that BDS, Bibi Derangement Syndrome, is stronger than its American brother TDS, Trump Derangement Syndrome. That is a bold statement, but let me present you with some supporting evidence. We all know that American mainstream media is full of delusional, at times dangerous extreme leftists. We see how they and their political backers persecute the president on each and every turn. Trump can simply do nothing right in their minds. Well, after all, he's Trump. They distort reality, lie, manipulate, and badger him using every conceivable tactic. The same can be said about Netanyahu in Israel. Just copy and paste the above and it applies here too. So why do I believe that BDS is a stronger mental disease than TDS? Let's look at some social media posts that showed up on the heels of this agreement in Gaza. First, one of the most senior at least in his own eyes, reporters in Israel, Raviv Drucker. This guy watched the press conference in Washington where President Trump presented his plan alongside Netanyahu, and here is what he had to say. Raviv Drucker tells everyone on arguably the most viewed channel in Israel that Netanyahu doesn't want to make a real hostage deal and that Trump inexplicably takes Bibi's position and there's nothing in this plan. Next is Nadav Eyal, another one of those senior in their own eyes reporters who posts on X, "Thank you, Mr. President." He forgets though that the internet exists, and we can look at his August 2024 post where he said, "Donald Trump is not a serious person. The implications of his election would be severe." Ram Ben Barak is a member of Knesset on behalf of Yair Lapid's party. He responded to the deal with an emotional post that reads, "Yes, thank you, President Trump, thanks. We will forever be grateful to you and your team." He even adds a little namaste emoji. How very touching. He also kind of assumed that no one would notice that in October of 2019 he wrote, "Trump gives us all the reasons to miss Obama." Right. Ronen Tzur is one of the leading figures in the anti-Bibi campaign on any given topic. On October 9th, this week, he posted on X, "Trump is a hero of Israel." Sadly for this shill, people quickly found his 2017 post that reads, "Barack Hussein Obama is gone, Donald Adolf Trump arrive, dying to know who comes after that." So what am I saying here? Having the knowledge as gleaned by reporters from internal communication between lefty activists that the left decided to ignore Netanyahu when crediting this deal and instead focusing on thanking Trump, and having reviewed the above contradictory posts, I can only conclude that these loons hate Bibi so much that they even thank Trump, who they obviously despise. Not only hypocritical, but also devious. But the Israeli left and its branches in government, media and social activism are not only hypocritical and devious, they were also absolutely wrong about everything in the past 2 years. In their blind hate to Netanyahu, they chose the completely wrong side of any debate. They opposed the focus on Gaza Strip in the beginning of the war. They demanded to actually start with Hezbollah. This was supported by the Minister of Defense at the time, Yoav Gallant, who made many mistakes. That was one of them. They raged against the Pagers operation. Some of them called it minor or a joke. Others said it was pointless and won't hurt Hezbollah. They railed against the elimination of Nasrallah. They screamed about it, leading to a wider war in the region, not yet realizing that Iran's nuclear and ballistic plans had to be dealt with. They opposed Operation Rising Lion, see above. They objected to the attack on Rafah, in which Yahya Sinwar was killed, because that, according to them, would cost the lives of the hostages. They objected to the attack on Gaza City, of course, for the same reason. They kept pushing for Israeli surrender as the path to return all of the hostages, waving signs that read, "Military pressure will kill the hostages." And now, when they see that only the military pressure materialized the conditions to their release, they try to rewrite history, inventing non-existent deals that Netanyahu supposedly rejected. They supported Kamala Harris and warned against Trump, because in their eyes, Trump was the crazy guy, and Kamala the level-headed woman. The list goes on and on. To paraphrase Winston Churchill's famous speech, never was so much BS spewed by so few on so many topics. So how do I wrap this up? Well, I think every Israeli and indeed anyone who cares about the West in general, should express a lot of gratitude for some people. Gratitude to the soldiers of the IDF who fought, those who died in battle, those who were injured, all in effort to make us all safe. Gratitude for all their families and supporting circles. Gratitude for Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Gratitude to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and Ron Dermer. Gratitude for anyone who had a hand in bringing our hostages home and setting the plate for a new reality in Gaza and in Israel. And I would add, thank you to God. And thank you, good people, for once again joining the Holy Land Dispatch podcast. See you next time. God bless.